Привit moi druzy. Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gertis. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand what's going on in the war in Ukraine. I try to provide context and I try to help you see things a little bit more clearly. So, what I want to talk about today is why words matter. If I can make you use particular words, or if I can restrict you from using particular words, I can actually shape not only the way that you see things, the way that you communicate, even the way that you think. This is why it's important to have freedom of speech, for example. So, um, the words that you use and the choice of the words that you use to describe things are supposed to be telling the truth, not telling you some falsehood or different opinion or view or shade the details in such a way that it seems like something else when it's something. Okay, so what am I talking about? So yesterday we were talking about this when with the Scott Ritter reaction video, and I got a lot of people that were uh, pushing back against me and saying, "Well, who's this professor? What's this? He's not really a professor." Yeah, I really am. But the most troubling part was when he was talking about the special military operation, and he would only use the term special military operation. He wouldn't call it a war, although he later slipped and was calling it a war, which was kind of fascinating. So let's hear a little bit by Scott here, because he's talking about why he said special military operation. So let's give this a listen.
I had a conference in my paying job the other day, and I made the reference to the term special military operation.
Lapdog.
And immediately somebody jumped in and said, "Well, I don't speak Putin."
That's right.
Meaning that simply by using the term special military operation, I was somehow buying into a Russian lexicon.
But you are. You're buying into the Russian narrative that that's all that it is. It's a war. Ask anyone in Ukraine. They'll tell you it's a war.
And therefore supporting Russian propaganda.
You are.
I said, well, that's about the most ignorant thing I've ever heard anybody say, because I'm not speaking Putin either. I'm speaking reality. This was a special military operation, the initial goals and objectives of which were to get Ukraine to the negotiating table, to bring a rapid conclusion to a problem between Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, but was it? Was it really? Let's look at what the definition of a war is. Now, this is a International Federation for Human Rights article, and it was written in August of 2022. The Russian authorities insist on calling it a special military operation. By the way, I'm going to show you two more videos, so stay with me. You do not need to declare war to be at war. That's correct. You can be in a state of war without a declaration of war just by your actions. So the invasion of Ukraine by Russian troops undoubtedly constitutes an unlawful use of force under the UN Charter. A little bit further down, on 21 July, the prosecutor's office of Moscow's district court explained for the first time de facto use of the word war. Okay, so what they said was if you use the word war, you can go to jail because you should be using the word special military operation. Why? There's a systemic crackdown on journalists and protesters for using the word war. It includes a March 4th adoption of laws prohibiting fake news about the special military operation and discrediting any of Russia's armed forces. And there have been multiple criminal cases. In July, a Moscow court sentenced municipal deputy Alexei Goranov to 7 years in prison for calling the special military operation a war. Now, he's not the only one. Many people have been jailed. Most recently, there was someone who went to jail for 25 years for treason for discussing things in public about the war. Okay, so now let's look at the definition. The Article 2.4 of the UN Charter prohibits the use of armed force against the territorial integrity or political independence of other states. So once that happens, armed aggression spilling across the border, you are in a state of war. The UN Charter recognizes only two exceptions, and that's individual or collective self-defense in the case of an armed attack against a member state. So they are, by legal definition, regardless of whatever nonsense Scott Ritter is saying here, in a state of war. Now, with that being said, let's look at some of this. Now, I also talked the other day about the hypocrisy of what's said in Russian state media. I'm rubber, you're glue. And people were saying with this video here, they're saying, wow, you must be kind of a masochist to put yourself through this. Well, I'm not really a masochist. I just want to understand what is happening, why things are happening the way that they are. And I'm trying to understand. So I'm watching RT yesterday and I see this pop up. And so we're going to listen to what they have to say here about the special military operation and how Ukraine is bad for requiring other embassies to use the
Ukraine
language.
is trying to dictate what can be said across other countries' media. This is
So they said Ukraine is trying to dictate what other countries can say across their media.
very intriguing, because the Ukrainian embassy in Serbia has issued a list of regulations concerning what information it says can be published about the conflict with Russia. The diplomatic mission sent the demands to several Serbian news outlets.
So every organization has a style book. They say this, don't say that, to try to get to say the correct things as truthfully as possible. Hopefully, sometimes this is overwhelmed by political concerns, like what's happening in Russia, where they're saying no, this is a special military operation. It's not really a war, even though you just read for yourself what a war is according to the UN. Well, okay, so Ukraine is saying, say it's a Russia's war of aggression, which it is.
The list demands that the
Now, not Ukraine's crisis or conflict. Now, calling it a crisis or conflict takes it down quite a bit in the ferocity of what it is compared to a war where people, tens of thousands, are dying.
dispute cannot be called the Ukraine conflict, but rather, quote, Russia's war of aggression and an unprovoked invasion. The Serbian rules also...
It was an unprovoked invasion. It was not a special military operation. Or maybe it was initially thought of as a special military operation, but what actually happened, in fact, according to the proper definition, is that it's a war.
So tell journalists to use the term occupation, never liberation.
Right. And if you're in Ukraine, it's an occupation. You are being, 4 of their oblasts are currently occupied. They're not being liberated. They're being stolen, perhaps, but not liberated.
The Ukrainian embassy has indeed confirmed the document is authentic. Serbian-American journalist Nebojša Malic says the document shows that Kiev is focusing on PR, not peace.
But they need to focus on PR because there's a legitimate battlefield where language is involved. And this is an important one for you because while most of you are not going to go to the front line, I know there are some people that are in Ukraine, and I've actually had some viewers on the front line. Most of you aren't going there, but you can be part of speaking the truth to others because you're using the correct terminology and not allowing them to get away with using something lesser than.
This particular set of editorial guidance coming from a government is so pernicious. A lot of Western outlets have already sort of abided by these guidelines even beforehand, and even though every outlet technically has their own style Bible, so to speak, having a government, especially one of the belligerent governments, dictate these terms is just not unheard of, but unpleasant. It has unpleasant historical connotations.
Okay, so having a government dictate these terms is not unheard of, but unpleasant. So let's see what the Russians were doing. So this is Al Jazeera saying, "Do not call it an invasion of the invasion of war." Russia tells the media and schools. This was written on 2nd of March, 2022. The Kremlin has been, so this was very early in the war, the Kremlin has been working hard to promote its version of events. An anti-war movement at home, which has seen nearly 7,000 people arrested across the country since the conflict began on Thursday. Russia's Internet Censor Board warns, referring to the ongoing military campaign as an invasion, attack, or declaration of war will lead to the offending website being blocked. What did he just say? He said, "Oh, this is a terrible thing that they're doing. It's not unheard of, but it's really unsavory for them to be doing." That's what Russia's doing. As I said, if you go back and you watch what Russia says about others, that's what it actually tends to do. So watch that video. Okay. According to one such manual, the Ukrainian nation did not exist. What manual? Well, schools across Russia have hosted special war-themed social studies classes where teachers must tell school children between the 7th and 11th grades the government's official position on history and what the Kremlin deems a special military operation. Again, they said that the Ukrainian nation did not exist until the 20th century, and in the 2014 suffered a bloody coup d'etat that installed American puppet regime. Now, I would urge you to go back to this video with Operator Starsky, where he talks about being present on the Maidan Revolution, being on the ground and seeing what it was, that it wasn't an overthrow from the United States, it was the people rising up to not put up with things. Okay, so that is what the Russians are actually doing while they're talking, bad-mouthing the Ukrainians for putting out their style guidelines. Okay. Let's watch one more video together and see how that plays out. So this is CNN talking about on March 6th, that's only a few days after the last article, just early into the war, March 6th of 2022, why their reporters largely left Russia.
The Kremlin is criminalizing journalism about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russian officials are building digital and legal walls to shield citizens from the truth, and people in other countries are also noticing the consequences. Maybe you've noticed this weekend as a viewer, because this weekend all the major American networks stopped broadcasting live reports from Russia. Networks based in the UK and Italy and other countries have done the same thing. The Washington Post and other digital outlets have stopped putting reporters' names and locations on their stories from Russia in a bid to protect them. Stripping bylines and stopping live shots and suspending operations, these are extraordinary measures that are being taken to protect staffers.
Why? Because if you say the wrong thing, you can go to jail in Russia for saying something that the now much more authoritarian Russian government says is not true, according to the official state line.
Not from physical bombs, as in Ukraine, but from potential retaliation and prison time in Russia. This all started when Vladimir Putin signed a censorship bill into law on Friday, rendering it impossible for news outlets to accurately report the news in Russia. The law made it a crime to spread information deemed false by Russian authorities. Remember, regulators in the country earlier warned Russian media not to call an invasion an invasion, not to call the war a war. So
remember, if you can restrict what people say, then you can restrict how they think, and even cause them not to be able to communicate with each other. And so this is very important, very powerful.
When this law passed, with a reported penalty of 15 years in prison, newsrooms convened urgent meetings about what to do. The BBC said the law, quote, appears to criminalize the process of independent journalism, and said it had to suspend operations in the country. Bloomberg said the law, quote, seems designed to turn any independent reporter into a criminal purely by association, making it impossible to continue any semblance of normal journalism inside the country. This is also why you have not seen live shots from Russia on CNN recently.
And this is why when you see the definition of war here, you don't buy when Scott Ritter says that this is a special military operation because its intents were limited. No, it's actually armed aggression spilling across the territorial border. It's a war. Okay, just a little bit more from CNN and we'll be done.
A CNN spokesperson said the network, quote, will stop broadcasting in Russia while we continue to evaluate the situation and our next steps moving forward. This also includes CNN's live broadcast into Russia, which used to be accessible in places like hotels.
Because they can't do it, because then they're violating Russia's new, fairly fascist authoritarian law when they're saying, see, that's what Ukraine's doing. Okay, so thank you for your time. I really appreciate that you stuck with me to hear what I had to say. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the subscribes. Thank you for the super thanks, the coffees. Thank you for caring about what's going on enough to inform yourself. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.